Listen to 1DimitriRadio, any of my episodes, you know that I'm a libertarian and I believe very strongly in the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment. I believe in all the amendments, even the third, even though it's kind of weird because we're not supposed to have soldiers in our homes. I never understood that one. But I do understand the Second Amendment. And whenever there is a change with the Supreme Court of the United States, I always wonder, well, what kind of justice are we going to have and what's going to happen with the Second Amendment? Because let's face it, there are two competing forces in this country. You've got the gun grabbers and the anti-gun grabbers, and there are different ways to phrase this, but ultimately you're either on one side or the other. Well, I happen to be on the side of freedom and liberty, and I've got no problem if you own as many weapons as you want to own, as long as you're just a responsible person and don't end up shooting me. So now we've got this opening here with the suspicious death of Antonin Scalia. And so I was thinking, well, I guess nothing's going to happen until after the election, and then they're going to have either Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is as president, or Hillary Clinton. But something interesting happened a few days ago, and that is that there was some talk that the president was going to nominate a justice for the Supreme Court. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird because I don't think that's going to go anywhere. But lo and behold, the president nominates this judge, Merrick Garland. I don't know anything about Merrick Garland. I don't know what he stands for, Second Amendment, or anything else for that matter. But I thought, well, who would? Who would know? Well, I immediately thought of Gun Owners of America. This is a grassroots organization, over 1.5 million people who care about guns. I call Gun Owners of America the NRA on steroids. And the executive director is a guy named Erich Pratt. And he is my special guest here at 1DimitriRadio. We reached out to him at the last minute, and he said, yes, absolutely, let's do this. So, Erich Pratt, welcome back to 1DimitriRadio. How you doing?
Dimitri, it's great to be with you again. Doing real well, thanks.
Good. Who is this Judge Merrick Garland, and should we be concerned if we care about the Second Amendment?
Well, we should be concerned. He is a far-left liberal, despite what the president or how the president tried to sell him. And let me just say, this is vintage Obama. You know, he says one thing but does another. He said he's going to appoint a moderate, but instead he gives us somebody that even the New York Times says if he's confirmed to the Supreme Court, he is going to be on the far left of the court. And, of course, this is classic Obama. I mean, remember, this is the guy who won the Lie of the Year award several years ago. If you like your doctor, you can keep him. He won the PolitiFact Lie of the Year. Well, Merrick Garland is no moderate. He is a true blue liberal. He is way out of step with average Americans. Probably the biggest fault in terms of Second Amendment issues is he supported a total gun ban in Washington, D.C., a total ban. So he would support effectively ripping the Second Amendment out of the Constitution. And, of course, that puts him way out of step with the average Americans who support the right to keep and bear arms. Heck, a recent poll, a Rasmussen poll, showed that only 1 in 5 Americans would want to live in a neighborhood where people were not allowed or didn't own guns. So, you know, Garland's part of that tiny minority. That's fine if he wants to live in a gun-free dystopia, but don't impose that on the rest of us. And my goodness, we are encouraging senators to stand up and just simply shelve this nomination.
What kind of rulings has he had? Are there like a few main gun cases, whether it's assault weapon ban or D.C. gun control or Chicago or some others, that he has had some rulings on?
Sure. Well, like I said, he supported Washington, D.C.'s gun ban, and that was the Heller case, or what became the Heller case. It was in 2007. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against Washington, D.C. D.C. didn't like the decision, so they appealed for an en banc review. So basically it would require more justices from that court to rule on it. Well, Garland was one of the anti-gun judges, thankfully in the minority, that wanted to rehear the case. He and 3 other anti-gun judges lost, thankfully. But we've already seen now where Garland stands on the very monumental Heller case of 2008. He has already cast his vote against it. Remember, the Heller case was a 5-4 decision with Scalia casting the deciding vote. So with Scalia gone, if Garland were to replace him, he now swings the court in the other direction. And let me say this, Dimitri. I mean, You and I think, would agree. We have a right to keep and bear arms,
yes,
no matter what the Supreme Court says, no matter what the president says.
Yes.
Having said that, there is a huge problem when you get a Supreme Court that is willing to support gun bans, to support registration, to support ammunition bans or certain bans on firearms. If it will support all these restrictions like D.C.-style gun control and impose it across the rest of the country, that means good people will go to jail for exercising their rights. That's what's at stake here. We can say till we're blue in the face, we have this God-given natural right. As the Declaration says, our rights come from God, and we believe that. But it's also important to have a government that protects our rights. And if the government will not protect our rights and, in fact, is waging war against those rights, then people are going to go to jail.
Has he ruled on other gun cases, or is this I know this is the main one, but does he also have a record of being anti-gun with other cases?
There's at least one other one that I know of, and that was in 2000 in a case that was challenging the Clinton administration because they were registering gun owners. They were taking the names that came into the NICS background check system, or in other words, when people were buying firearms and it was being bounced against the NICS system, they were retaining the gun owners' names. By the way, that's why, as a good libertarian, Dimitri, you should oppose, and I'm sure you already do, oppose background checks, because there is that potential for registering gun buyers. Well, that's what the Clinton administration was doing, and they were retaining the names for 6 months. Who knows if they were only retaining them for 6 months, but they were at least openly retaining them for 6 months, and so this was challenged as unconstitutional, unlawful, etc. Well, Garland voted with to uphold what Clinton was doing. In fact, he was in the majority on that, so the court case went against us. It went in favor of Janet Reno, who was the Attorney General at the time, or at least who the case was named against. So, here, not only did he cast an anti-gun vote, he also showed that he's willing to support executive power even when they're illegally stepping outside the Constitution and outside the law to push liberal causes like gun control. Garland is willing to support that. That is very troubling and should trouble people, who are interested in all kinds of issues, not just gun ownership.
It is amazing to me. This is the first I've heard of this, and frankly, it's the first I'm sure that my listeners here at 1DimitriRadio have heard of this, because I watch the cable news channels a lot, as well as the broadcast news shows and public affairs. I mean, all that wonky type stuff. And I must tell you that everyone else has been talking about, well, Merrick Garland is a fairly moderate Democrat. He's more of a centrist, and that's not what I'm hearing from you at all. Now,
that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Now, is he that way on other issues as well? Is he like centrist with other issues and just he's really, really bad on the gun issue, or is he really bad on a lot of issues?
No, it's other issues too, and that's why the New York Times said if he gets confirmed to the court, he'll be just right behind Ginsburg and Sotomayor as the most liberal judges. In fact, he'll be more liberal than Breyer and Kagan, not exactly well-known conservatives on the court. So he's going to tilt the court far to the left. We are talking about a generational battle. This battle here, to keep him off the court, if he gets on the court, it is something that will affect us for a generation, as there will be myriads of court cases that will come not just on gun issues but on others. But most specifically, the gun issue is typically the bellwether issue of freedom. I mean, you and I know that. I mean, it is absolutely essential to freedom. And if he is willing to say that D.C.'s gun ban was constitutional, then, oh my goodness, then look out. I mean, that could be imposed upon the rest of the country. And, so you're absolutely right. The cable stations are trying to make this guy sound to be like a moderate. Apparently they didn't even read the New York Times article because they let the cat out of the bag. But now the mantra is, well, if Hillary wins, then can we, accept him in a lame duck session? And every Republican that stands in front of a microphone, they're trying to nail them and get them to commit to having hearings and vote on him in a lame duck session. And we would say no, Absolutely not. The Senate does not have an obligation to rubber stamp whomever the president nominates. Look, there doesn't have to be 9 justices on the court. That's not in the Constitution. There's been more justices, there's been fewer. Senators have a duty to uphold the Constitution, and Garland would eviscerate the Constitution. There is absolutely no scenario where the Senate should ever approve a nomination like Garland, because in doing so, senators would have to violate their oath of office to support and defend the Constitution when they would be voting for somebody that they know already has a history of voting to rip certain provisions out of the Constitution.
Yeah, was he also opposed to the Citizens United case, or did he oppose that idea of, donating money? Did he have any kind of hand in that ruling?
I don't know if he has a record on that, and I don't know if he ever cast a vote on that, but that is it's certainly a very good question.
Yeah, because if he ends up, we find out that he ended up being opposed to this whole Citizens United thing, then if he helps sway the court over into gun grabbing, and then with Citizens United we can't even raise money to object, we're screwed.
Yeah, we lose our First Amendment right to protect our Second Amendment rights. That's the stranglehold that the liberal left would love to oppose. And, let's be clear. If Hillary Clinton wins, she wants to overturn that decision. So she's going to be nominating justices that are not only going to be anti-Second Amendment, but they're also going to be squelching our First Amendment rights too. It's not too often you can say that an election is a historic election, but this really is this November, because the next president may be nominating as many as 4, perhaps even 5 justices, especially if they go 8 years. So this really is going to be an important, very important election coming up, as it's going to determine the direction that our nation's going to go for years to come.
Okay. Now, Eric, I'm talking with Erich Pratt, by the way, Executive Director, Gun Owners of America. The only presidential candidate I'm aware of, at least among Republicans and Democrats, who named 1 or 2 people, I think, who he would have as replacements for Antonin Scalia, is Donald Trump. He mentioned a couple names. I think one was a judge from Wisconsin or something. Do you know anything about these people that Trump was recommending, or saying that he would, that's the kind of person he would nominate?
I don't. The only one I remember is the one he mentioned before Scalia died, which was his sister, who's on the courts in New York, in the federal court system. And, of course, she's a very radical, also anti-gun judge.
Yeah, no, he did mention at least one name in one debate right after, I think it was after Scalia's death. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was after Scalia's death. Trump did walk that back. Because that was, boy, that would be, the end of the republic as we know it.
Yeah, I understand. No, but there was not his sister, but there was a judge that he did mention as saying, someone that he would admire and put on the court, and I just didn't know if you knew anything about that judge or not. Because, give Trump at least that. He's the only one who said, that particular person I'd, seriously consider. So for whatever it's worth, I don't know. Now, a couple of things here. It looks like Donald Trump is going to have the most delegates going into the convention, and unless the fix is in, and by the way, I believe it is, he is the most likely to be the Republican presidential nominee. Is that fair to say, Eric?
Well, certainly he's got the most delegates, and you're absolutely right. Who knows what's going to happen if any one candidate only has a plurality. Of course, there's a lot of variables that could happen as well. Let's say Kasich drops out. At this point, it doesn't seem like he's going to drop out, but let's say Kasich does. Then polls have shown that in head-to-head contest between Trump and Cruz actually wins. So does that then, now it still may not mean that he would get enough to win outright, but then right. You go to the convention basically, even, both of them even. So it's very interesting what's going to happen over these next few months.
Okay, now regarding the Second Amendment, I know that the Gun Owners of America, your political action committee or something, endorses or supports Ted Cruz, and I understand that. Donald Trump, though, has been making lots and lots of, strong statements for a good while now, certainly not as long as Cruz, regarding, supporting the Second Amendment. Apparently Trump and his sons are NRA members and go hunting a lot and all that. Do you think that the Second Amendment would be safe with either President Trump or President Cruz?
I certainly hope so. The reason we endorse Cruz is because Cruz has always been there. He's solid as a rock. In fact, we were talking about the Heller case from 2008. He's the one that actually led the 30 other state attorney generals with an amicus brief and argued the case against the D.C. gun ban in the court. So we know he is rock solid, has always been against gun control, whereas Trump is kind of a newcomer to the position. In the past, he supported a ban on semi-automatic firearms. He supported a longer waiting period. Now, he has said, certainly about the semi-auto ban, that he no longer supports it. Okay, let's hope that's the case. Although recently he did support a ban on people who are on the so-called terror watch list. And by the way, people who are on that list are just put on there without any due process. So that would mean people would lose their Second Amendment rights without being convicted in the court of anything. It could just be somebody in the administration who hates you and puts you on the list. I mean, we've even seen people like, remember Senator Ted Kennedy and Representative Don Young being prevented from flying because they were on the no-fly list.
I actually liked that, the fact that...
Well, actually, I agree with you there. I mean, certainly Kennedy shouldn't have been driving, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Over bridges.
I had no problem with that. Ted Kennedy on the no-fly list? Yeah, I'll go for that. Yeah. Okay. No due process? Yeah, okay, that's fine.
But from a libertarian perspective, as you open the show, Dimitri.
Yeah, there is that.
Oh, yeah, there's that sticky Constitution, right.
Yeah, doggone you.
So all that to say, Cruz has always been there. You're absolutely right. Both have been, as far as, talking about gun-free zones, both have been very clear, want to repeal gun-free zones, want more people, good people armed. And so, I certainly hope that Trump, if elected, would stick to his guns, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, what about Kasich? And I'll tell you why. Because I just did an episode earlier today. By the way, we're doing this interview on Thursday, March 17, 2016. Happy St. Patrick's Day if you're Irish. I don't know. But one of the guests, or one of the things that I did yesterday, or in today's episodes, I should say, is I played an audio clip of a senior Republican in the inner circle there, a guy named Curly Hogland or something like that. And he said essentially that the system is rigged, that they can change the rules and the voting doesn't really count. And it says to me that the fix is in. Now, whether they'll go ahead with it or not, I don't know. But the fix absolutely is there with that Rule 40, which is just this damnable thing that they have. So if they rig the system and end up picking someone like, how about John Kasich because he won Ohio, or Paul Ryan, or even Mitt Romney, how are they on the Second Amendment?
Well, Kasich is horrid. Kasich, he's had a very mixed bag. For example, right after the tragic Columbine shooting, there was an amendment by Representative Virgil Goode to repeal the gun ban in Washington, D.C. He voted to retain he's one of the few Republicans to do that, voted to retain the gun ban in Washington, D.C. He was also, he cast the deciding vote on Clinton's semi-auto ban. Jeez. And in fact, you can go on the internet and see this very lovely letter, hand-signed by the president, crossing out his name and writing John on top, thanking him for casting that vote in 1994. So, he's got quite a record of supporting gun control. I mean, he could point to certain things that he's done that are good, and we'll give him that. But, of the three main candidates, he would certainly be the one at the very bottom on Second Amendment issues.
What about Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney? It looks like the insiders want those two again, one way or another. How are they in the Second Amendment?
Romney, not so good either, and Paul Ryan, we have him rated as a B. So, he's, that tells you that some of the times he's going to be against you, but generally speaking, he's okay. But none of these are anybody that we're certainly going to put if they did become the nominee. We're certainly not going to go to bat for them, not with the record that they have.
All right, now back to the United States Senate. Again, you never know what to believe with the cable news channels. But Nina Totenberg was talking about, and she's, with NPR, and they were interviewing her on either MSNBC or CNN, one of those two. And she had said that, well, with this Merrick Garland, he's going to start meeting some of these Republicans. The wall is already breaking down, and he's going to meet with some of the Republicans who are in tough Senate fights, election fights, and that there might be some sort of consensus after the election to maybe get this guy confirmed for the Supreme Court. Is there any truth to that?
Well, there's certainly truth to the fact that that's what they're trying to do. And this was the thing that we warned about from the get-go, and why we encouraged the senators like Grassley and McConnell not to even hold hearings, because once you have the president nominate somebody, then we predicted he's going to start going to office, bring his family, show, oh, look what a nice guy he is, and he goes hunting on the weekends or does this and that. I mean, they're going to try to make him look like a regular guy. Meanwhile, the dagger is just waiting there to stick you in the back. And so we said, do not hold hearings. Now, initially, Senate Republicans were saying, oh, we'll let the process play out. We'll give his hearings and we'll give him a vote. And we rallied our members to contact Senators Grassley and McConnell and say, no, absolutely not, because once you let that cat out of the bag, then Harry Reid has all kinds of parliamentary tricks that he can use to try to force votes and keep forcing votes on it, even while they keep taking, Garland or whoever the pick is from office to office and putting pressure on them. I mean, that's the way that the left plays this game. So thankfully, after a lot of pressure into Senate leadership offices, they did an about-face. They said, we're not holding hearings. In fact, McConnell even said, no, there's not a snowball's chance in hell. And they're digging in their heels for now. Now, you raise what happens after the election. Well, for starters, that's why it is absolutely essential. This is not a year where anybody can stay home. We have to make sure that Hillary Clinton does not enter the White House with so many justices that could be, coming due, retiring, stepping down, or even passing over the next few years. The next president really is going to get a chance to reshape the court for many years to come. We think Cruz would be the best one, obviously. He's a very strong constitutionalist, but absolutely sure it cannot be Hillary Clinton.
All right, now back to Mitch McConnell. I find him to be remarkably stupid, even though he's a lawyer and head of the Senate. He just does so many dumb things, and he looks like a turtle, but that's beside the point. Do you think that Mitch McConnell has enough brains and enough balls to actually keep this from happening? I'm always amazed by how they're able to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, yes. And they're always willing to raise the surrender flag. I've been encouraged so far. They have dug in, and in a way that I've not seen them do for a long time, and I half wonder that even they must realize what is at stake here, that this is a monumental, history-changing event if Obama is able to actually put somebody onto the Supreme Court, that everything they believe in is going to die whenever it percolates up to the Supreme Court. So I think they get it, and that's why they have really they've just entrenched themselves, both Grassley and granted, after a shaky start, I will remind you, but they have now entrenched themselves. I think they heard from enough folks in their states, and that's good. I think we need to keep the pressure on them. And here at Gun Owners of America, we did a few initial alerts in February, right after Scalia passed away, and we have continued doing so even up to most recently, to continue generating the good calls, good emails into these offices to keep reminding them, look, you're going to be hearing from the liberal media, they're going to be staging protests outside your door, but listen to us. We do not want a vote or even hearings on this nominee. Let's wait till the next president. I hear you. Now, what about this? What about this? Obama is, I mean, they're all liars there. I mean, Republicans, they're all liars as far as I'm concerned. I hate all of them. But what would happen if, okay, then you got, after the election, you have a lame duck session. And let's say that the Republican presidential nominee wins. Let's say it's Trump, Ted Cruz, whoever. He wins. Then the Senate goes out of business until there's a new Senate comes in. There's this thing called a recess appointment, where if the Senate is out of business, a president, any president, this president, could then just make the appointment without any worrying about any Senate approval, and could put Merrick Garland as the final act of President Obama sticking it to the Republicans. Do you think that he would do a recess appointment?
I certainly think he would consider it, and I would say, Dimitri, we fight one battle at a time, and when we get to that point, maybe our what we argue is that the Senate doesn't go into recess, and it just continues, and it can do that for several weeks even after the election, and that's going to be
But at some point it does end. And then that's when the president could do that recess appointment. So I could see President Obama actually doing that as a really one final way of, here's my legacy. Here's, screw you Republicans and nothing you can do about it. I could actually see him doing that as a giant FU to the conservatives. Maybe
they stay in session until after the new president is sworn in. I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to look at, and that's, months from now. We have a long road to hoe at this point, but, there's going to be a lot of strategizing, obviously, between here and then.
All right, one last question regarding the legality of this. I don't know if you've looked into this or not. Can you impeach a Supreme Court justice? Let's say that Obama did a recess appointment and said, screw everyone, I'm just going to put him on. Could the Senate then remove a Supreme Court justice?
Well, certainly the Congress has the power to do that. Now, whether they could make a winning argument on doing it just because he was confirmed or appointed by the president in a recess appointment, that might be a difficult argument to make. But certainly there is the power to impeach judges. So, that's certainly going to be one of the things on the table, obviously.
Boy, this is just amazing how badly this could go for Second Amendment rights, even if the Republicans somehow won the White House. Because, boy, if you're gonna, if you're banking on Mitch McConnell and those idiots in the Senate, spineless idiots, and did they have any role in that Omnibus Bill, or was that simply a House thing that got approved?
No, they did too. That was one of the things that Ted Cruz called them out. Called his leadership out on and called them liars on the Senate floor. Yeah, we're going to need to keep the heat on McConnell, and I encourage people to go to our website at gunowners.org, and if you haven't already, sign up for our email alerts. They're free, and we've got alerts that are going to McConnell just to regularly keep the heat on him, but also to the other senators as well. It's very important that they continue to hear from us, because like we've been talking about, Dimitri, they're going to be hit outside their offices with protesters and things like that. We demand a vote. That's going to become the mantra for the next several months. We demand a vote. We can overcome that, and we did after the Sandy Hook shooting. We were able to overcome that. We demand a vote and kill all the gun control legislation. But it takes a monumental grassroots effort to be putting the heat on these guys, and we're willing to fight it, but we need our folks behind us.
Oh, speaking of monumental grassroots effort, you're in Virginia. There was a very interesting situation there with gun and reciprocal gun things with other states, with concealed carry or some such thing, with your Attorney General. Let's follow up with that. Give us an overview of what the problem was and then what the solution was.
Sure. Well, the Attorney General had basically reneged on the reciprocity agreements that Virginia had with other states, and just unilaterally just withdrew them. Well, they caught a lot of heat for that, and the governor said, all right, well, let's work out a deal. Now, the deal is somewhat of a mixed bag. Let me tell you, because what the deal involves, first of all, was restoring the reciprocity. In fact, it even went further to give automatic reciprocity to any state that issues concealed carry permits. So we actually came out better. The negative side of the deal involved voluntary background checks at gun shows. Now, some might say, well, that's not so bad because it's only voluntary, but, realize that the end goal here is universal background registration checks. And so this, they're being very calculated in what, this chess game that they're playing with us, really. And so, that's what that's all about. In getting now, if you go to a gun show and you buy a gun privately, there is a system set up where you can run a background check on it, and that's obviously just going to be a stepping stone to later, where an anti-gun governor can say, well, we've already got the system in place for it. Let's just make this mandatory. We were talking earlier, the problem with background checks. One of the huge problems is that it gives the name of every gun buyer to either the state government or the FBI. So that's a huge problem, a huge potential infringement of our liberties with registration lists being kept, et cetera. So anyway, again, a mixed bag in terms of what happened, but we did get the reciprocity back. That was the final result of it.
So it was a net gain, even though there are still troubling aspects. Net gain, yes, no?
Well, people fall on different sides of the fence on that. Some of the gun groups here in Virginia said, yeah, it's a positive net gain. Others, like us, said no. But we're glad. I think we can all agree we're glad to get reciprocity back. Of course, I don't like the precedent that was set either, and that is an anti-gun governor or president can basically stick a gun in your ribs and say, I'm taking away your rights. And then when we scream loudly that we're being robbed, they say, oh, okay, but now you've got to pay us to get some of your rights back. And that's in essence what McAuliffe did. He stole some of our rights, and then in order to get back reciprocity, he said, well, okay, well then you've got to agree to background checks at gun shows. That's a that legitimizes the theft of our liberties, and we certainly hope that doesn't become a precedent for this type of thing all across the country.
Well, Virginia used to be a solid red state, and now it seems to be kind of purplish because of all the government workers in D.C. who live in that part of in Virginia near D.C. Is it turning into more of a purplish state?
Oh, absolutely. And if you were to take out Northern Virginia, the rest of the state would be very red. But the Northern Virginia area constantly outweighs the rest of the state in statewide elections. And, that's why we now have a liberal Democrat governor with 2 liberal Democrat senators.
Holy cow. Holy cow. Oh, well, Erich Pratt, I always give my guest the last word here at 1DimitriRadio, so my guest can speak directly to my listener. Great opportunity to repeat key points or to bring up new points, and also to promote websites, speaking engagements, books, DVDs, anything like that. So I'm going to hand you my Shure SM7B dynamic microphone. I'm going to step aside, and Erich Pratt, my microphone is yours.
Well, thank you, Dimitri. It's been great being on with you. And again, I would encourage people to like us on our Facebook page at Gun Owners, but also go to our website at gunowners.org. We are a membership organization. People can sign up for $20 membership. That's the cheapest rate going around, but also for our free email alerts so they can become armchair lobbyists in this battle. And we make it easy for people. We give them alerts, and with just a couple clicks of their mouse, they can take action. And it's that heat that we've been able to generate. NPR said that with just one email alert, we can light up the lines in Washington, D.C. That's been able to defeat gun control. And so we need you now more than ever this year. So I encourage you to go to gunowners.org.
Erich Pratt, always a pleasure, always a delight. I always learn a lot from you that I do not get with the cable news channels. I really don't. So thank you so much. Keep up the great work. Give my best to Larry, and we'll be talking again real soon, okay?
I sure will. Thank you.